Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We've got the NRA boys here today. Trung Phan, Jack Butcher, Bilal Zaidi, and we got a special guest. We had to bring Rick Burton back on the show. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me.
Got that beautiful view behind you there, man. Looking good.
Bahamas? Are you in the Bahamas?
I'm not in the Bahamas, and I am not in a home that was paid for by customer deposits. So
there we go.
There we go. So that's what we consider a good start here. So Bilal, do you want to tee off where we're starting today?
For people who've never listened to the last episode, Rick was a favorite guest for a lot of people on the pod. You came back in the day. I can't remember when that was. Was it like 6 months ago?
It's March or April, yeah.
Maybe 6 months or so.
So way back
in the day. Yeah. And so you kind of unloaded on a bunch of stuff, letting us know what's going on. And obviously with the FTX situation, we covered in depth as much as we could last week on Monday. But obviously a lot changed. By the time it came out on Tuesday, things had already changed. The Binance still didn't go through. And like 100 things have happened since then. Obviously, you're an OG in the crypto space, so we want to bring you on to talk about what's happened since. Trung, did you want to give a quick summary of what happened?
Yeah, so I'll tell where we were.
Deep email.
Yeah, the listeners will laugh because before we got on this chat, it's like, Bilal, team me up so I can absolve us from last week's conversation. So last week when we recorded, what we knew was that that FTX looks like it was having a run on customer deposits. Everybody's trying to withdraw. They're throttling people from withdrawing. And people were suspecting that it probably had something to do with Alameda blowing up and maybe some funds were commingled. But that's the extent to what we knew. And since then, a lot of things changed. I think where it's worth teeing off is that stuff all went down. CZ had done the tweet on Sunday, basically saying that the FTT token, the token for FTX exchange, was like a dog shit, and everything that catalyzed everything. So I think where I leave it, hand it off to Rick, is so Rick, on I believe it's Tuesday, CZ, the CEO of Binance, largest crypto exchange in the world, basically takes a look at FTX and decides that he will not invest. So I'd like to get your thoughts on when you saw that he was stepping away. What do you think about the situation? And in addition, for the people who don't know, Rick has been very vocal about being skeptical of SBF, and Rick's been in the crypto space for nearly a decade now, OG on the Ethereum Foundation, and I'd like your thoughts on what you thought about SBF before this, and then kicking off from CZ saying, I'm not going to kind of save this company.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just to be clear, I was never part of the foundation. I just helped Gavin and Vitalik a little bit. So when those people do incredible work, so I don't want to tar them with my brush, but at a high level, my understanding of where we are right now is that the supposed Chinese wall between FTX, the exchange, and Alameda Research, the hedge fund, did not exist at all. And this was something that had been rumored and discussed for a while, but I don't think almost anyone I respect in this industry had any idea of the extent to which those two organizations were kind of fudging together. And so what that means from a practical sense is when you were depositing money in FTX, eventually when Alameda Research was making losses, they were plugging the gap with your funds. So, which is just the cardinal sin of an exchange. You're meant to store funds one-to-one and keep them separate from the deposits that you may use in other activities. And everybody felt weird about the idea of a single man owning two entities that by definition are competitive with one another and give each other information. And so this kind of push out into the regulatory environment in DC was very strange. We can get onto that later. But at a high level, when you put your money in FTX, you suddenly lost that number on the screen. And this is what I think is very important, is how to trust a number on a screen. And so when it said you had 5 Bitcoin, they did not hold 5 Bitcoin. They started trading that money and lending it and doing highly speculative things. So that's my understanding of the overall reason why eventually this imploded.
Okay. And you've been following the space obviously for a long time. What was your initial reaction when SBF came up? Like you've been watching the space and you've tweeted about it. So this is not new for anybody that had followed it. So what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, I want to be clear. I had no inside information on like FTX's problems. It was more I got to see how SBF interacted privately with founders over email threads, founders in my portfolio or like people I've helped. I got to see how he interacted with me when one of his henchmen tried to acquire a domain name that I owned, and I really didn't like that. And he kind of implied that I could be bought. And I really didn't like the whole sushi swap drama, because that was just him kind of pulling his puppet strings and orchestrating the whole thing. And kind of
Rick, what was that for people who don't know?
Well, they just cloned Uniswap and jerry-rigged a token onto it. And now some good people kind of came to that project afterwards, but certainly at the beginning, the whole project was a complete clusterfuck. And then the people that this Anon chef Nomi, who almost certainly was SBF, he was awarding him huge amounts of tokens to get started. And that's where I had a good public spat with him on Twitter. And then there was this person who stepped in who only lasted a year. And so I think I was proved right on that point. But every part of SBF's being spoke to a mercenary intent. And this is how I always divide crypto people, is like on the scale of missionary to mercenary, where are you? And SBF was kind of like, Vitalik is like 11 out of 10, on the missionary front, and really believes in the overarching philosophy of all of this. SBF was right the other way of the spectrum on the mercenary front, where he's just trying to accumulate as much capital as possible. So I think I had a read on him from a personal perspective, but I had no understanding of what was going on behind the scenes at FTX, and would not have guessed that.
Right. You said before the call that you just, for everything that you felt negative about him, you never suspected like the extent of what has gone on.
Yeah. I mean, it really looks like people would be lucky to get 10 cents or 5 cents on the dollar. And that is just a whole different level of fraud. And we should, really think about what are the systems that enabled this fraud to go down. Yeah.
Actually, Bilal, I'll have a follow-up question to that, Rick, is a lot of people asking how far back does this set the crypto industry, right? I've seen a lot of threads of a longtime crypto CEO of Kraken, Jesse, wrote a long thread, and he was obviously very upset, and he felt that this would set the industry back quite a bit. So could you speak to that
I think
a
he's
bit?
the chairman now, but he's a great example of someone who's a true missionary and who's kind of honored customers' assets, and even on various Twitter spaces has said, I really don't think you should use an exchange as a wallet. You should move your funds off the exchange the second you can, which speaks to someone who really cares about the mission. So I think it sets us back from a outsider in, and I think it pushes us forward from an insider out perspective. And so what do I mean by that? I think for everybody who has either dabbled in crypto or held a little bit on an exchange and has now lost those funds, I don't think they'll ever really consider trusting this community ever again. But I think now when we talk about memes like "not your keys, not your coins," we have much better phrases to use, which is remember what SBF did at FTX. Like the Bitcoin community, when they went through Mt. Gox, they got hardened and they started to obsess about self-custody, and they really cared about it because they all felt this loss of control of their funds. I never actually got into Mt. Gox because I looked at their CSS and it was just dog shite, and I looked at Coinbase and it was just Bootstrap. So that's actually what led me to Coinbase. So I got super lucky by just choosing Coinbase over Mt. Gox back in the day. I was like, if that is the way you design a website, there's no fucking way I'm sending my money to Japan. So I like dodged that bullet when I had very little capital to deploy. But like with FTX, it's hitting not just Bitcoiners, but crypto more broadly. So I think that every wallet and self-custody solution and key management software and crypto on-ramp that just does fiat straight into your wallet or straight off your wallet into fiat, all of those pieces of software and companies and that whole industry that focuses on helping you control your assets, I think they've just got the gas put into them big time. And I can speak to some of the founders that I really like in that space, but So it's really bad from a public perception. I think it's really bad, really good from a kind of creation perspective, certainly around the principles that we should care about.
Can I do a quick sidebar?
Do it, man.
So, Rick, I'm curious for your take on the way FTX was positioned as a brand too, because I know they use the language for traders by traders. So I think, and I'm curious for your take on this, I'm just curious, like what percentage of people on there are holding funds on the exchange because they're doing high frequency trading of some kind, or they're accessing leverage, or the way in wasn't necessarily that same crypto philosophy that might have brought people to Coinbase back in the day, right? Because FTX is making these high frequency markets and early tokens. And I know Coinbase is doing that as well now, but like the time they came into the narrative, they kind of, as a function of what they stood for, that's the reason why a lot of people kept a lot of assets on their platform. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes a ton of sense, but it also speaks to the vast majority of people's exposure and usage of crypto is hoping number go up. That's actually like the number one use case for 95% of people. And that speaks to like the limited utility that we've actually delivered as an ecosystem. Like I think there's some real green shoots that are growing nicely despite bull or bear market on the prices. But yeah, it speaks, most people trade crypto because they're hoping they get into one that goes up a lot. And they've heard of a friend who did that, and they've seen, you know, a workmate retire, or like something has just driven them insane to the point where they do that. And you look at all of the marketing for FTX with Tom Brady's, Gisele Bündchen, like all talking about spreading the message on a phone, you know, thawing the ice with a flamethrower. It's just insane marketing that speaks
3
to
seconds
nothing
of
valuable.
due diligence, right? Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah,
remember that?
Yeah. So
no,
I think you're absolutely right. But even as a trader, it still doesn't take you more than half an hour to kind of retire large sums of funds to a ledger for the night and move them back on the next day.
Right.
It's not super hard, if I'm honest. And quite frankly, seeing some of these hedge funds blow up who had 80 to 90% of their funds on FTX, I just have limited sympathy for them.
And another question I had for you is versus a decentralized exchange, is it like there's obviously speed trade-offs, cost trade-offs, and the amount of leverage maybe you can access through a centralized entity that's just like not governed by any kind of parameters, like collateral parameters. So have we seen things like FTX grow faster than the Uniswaps of the world because they kind of promising things that are, I'm not going to say against the laws of physics, but you get what I'm trying to imply there, where like if you're trading on Uniswap, you don't get this excessive access to excessive leverage.
Totally, but you can, to be clear, you can access pretty decent leverage in DeFi if you're looking to put on a leverage position. And also many of the exchanges like that have focused on great user experiences on layer 2 provide a much better interface than something like FTX. So one of the founders I'll shout out, who's based in San Francisco, who left Coinbase to build Slingshot.finance, and that's Clinton Bembry. He's a founder I've been trying to help, and the interface to that is absolutely beautiful, and it's really easy to use. So I think part of it is people are more familiar with an email and password sign up. Part of it is very few people care about like the underlying tech. But you know, almost like decentralization as a meme is kind of hollow. But when you fill it with, do you want your funds to be stolen or not? It has a lot more weight to it, and like that's a lot more visceral for many more people today now. So I agree that they had become a central point of failure and accumulated a lot of assets and traders and things like that. But I also think those people can be increasingly well served in decentralized finance built on layer 2 technology on Ethereum, should they want to just trade. And every time they make a trade, the assets are, you know, returned to their wallet, and they don't even have to do any kind of hygiene around it at the end. It's just all happens automatically, and so long as they practice good security practices, they're not going to experience what we've had go down in the last week.
Mad. All right, so Jack, did you have a follow up to that?
No, that was great. I appreciate it. I was injecting.
That's a great. No, perfect. And then I realized we didn't do the meme of the week, which is all related to this, by the way. So I will, just to lighten the mood a bit, I'm just going to share my screen for a minute. It'll bring us, because it's been a rough week for all of us. And we've got to bring, I mean, some of these that have been popping out. This is not even a meme. It's just a message. But this is 219.eth. Said, just stating the facts of the SBF case makes you sound like Alex Jones, which is incredible, which is so true. And then this brings us on to our next topic, which is, Trung, do you want to explain what this tweet is that's gone mega viral here? As you can see, your boy Elon Musk called out the New York Times somewhere down here. I don't know where it's gone.
Well, he's always looking for an opportunity. That was like,
there we go. So yeah, Trung, what was going on here?
You right there, Trung. Just laid him up.
Alley-oop, right? So for the listeners and the viewers that didn't get a chance to read, so basically what's happened, let's follow up a bit. SBF has kind of gone dark. He's in the Bahamas, I believe, presumably. And from what I understand, I have no idea if this is correct. This is from me just reading the internet. So maybe not correct. He's maybe under watch by Bahama authorities because they still have extradition with the United States. He has not been able to flee, unlike some of his colleagues, which is what it sounds like. So he's been kind of going dark. And over the last 36 hours, though, he's been tweeting out cryptically a number of like 1 or 2 letter tweets that are forming a thread. He's finally completed it. It ended up being like 12 tweets, and it was like H, letter A, the letter P. It ended up spelling what happened. But his first real kind of like coming out after everything blew up and CZ walked away was an article by the New York Times. And the article I saw when it came out, I saw the instant reaction was very negative to it. Sounded like a puff piece, but I'm like, all right, I'll read it. So it says here, the title of the article is How Sam Bankman-Fried's Crypto Empire Collapsed. And then it said, Mr. Bankman-Fried said in an interview that he had expanded too fast and failed to see warning signs, but he shared few details about his handling of FTX's customers' funds. So I just want to talk about the language here. Bilal, can you go down a couple tweets? Like, so that's the New York Times, which is definitely leans left. And then you look at some of these other, go down 2 more. You look at some of these other financial media publications, and they haven't been afraid to throw in the words like there's a backdoor involved, potentially, where SBF was able to move funds with the auditors finding out. CoinDesk wrote the words, Bahamas looking at a criminal investigation. Bloomberg straight up just says, Larry Summers says it might be an Enron situation. And then if you go, and Financial Times, which got a hold of the balance sheet, which may or may not be true, but they did a small investigation on it, was like, listen, a lot of this money went to like shit coins and other illiquid investments. If you hit that and go to the next, so I'd like to point out the next two. And the reason I'm pointing these out is because Wall Street Journal writes criminal liability in their headline, same day. That came out an hour before New York Times. And CNBC said that it looks like what happened may be illegal. New York Times used none of these words. That was the nature of the tweet, right? They never used the word fraud, never used the word crime, never used the word backdoor or criminal or hack. A hack happened also, we didn't talk about. But I thought it was interesting word usage. So I actually throw this to Rick, because I actually don't even know your opinion on this. Rick, what do you think about this article? I thought it was an interesting way to frame it, because if you only read the New York Times article,
interesting way,
yeah, it would sound like SBF was like just a founder who grew too fast.
Yeah, just something messed up. Exactly, that's what I got from it.
Yeah, I think you should just imagine what would they be writing if he was a Trump donor. Like what would the take have been? And it certainly wouldn't have been this gentle. If he'd funneled, $50 million to Trump and Trump's cronies, they would have taken the hatchet to him. So, at this point, I'm not a regular reader of the New York Times. I despise the fact that even when you subscribe, you have to call them to unsubscribe. I mean, the journalists there are just, really upset that social media has taken over traditional media, and they're kind of clawing their way back into these different algorithms, and resentful that they picked these degrees that where they are the beck and call of algorithm crafters. So, to me, it's just another example of why you may sound like Alex Jones pulling together all these conspiracy theories, but it sure looks pretty bad when, the Biden kind of PR machine is not upset that a major Biden donor is just a giant criminal, and that the funds that have flowed into Democratic politicians' coffers were literally customers' funds because of how fraudulent this operation was. So I don't know. To me, it's just disgusting, and I think your tweet really caught on because it just objectively shows you how few phrases there were that were critical at all. I'm glad you highlighted that because they look silly.
Bilal, you read it, yeah?
Yeah, I read it after you posted this.
What was your, honestly, what was your, I probably biased you a bit. Or
no, I probably didn't need too much biasing myself either, to be honest, because I'm also not really that subscribed. I used to love New York Times. I thought they used to write great stuff back in the day. And then not just New York Times, but a lot of the mainstream stuff. You kind of know exactly what they're going to say. We've talked about it before with the New York Times headline episode we did at one point. And yeah, I kind of just felt like objectively reading it, the language was very soft. It was like at one point they're talking about him potentially doing something criminal, or like they didn't use the word criminal, but something that was like fraud or something like that. And then it just switches to talking about him playing a game. Do you remember that part? And I'm like, what is going? Yeah. It's kind of like, what is going on here?
They buried the story. So I'll just add this. It was a 2,200 word article. They buried the meat of the story, which is the fact that they misappropriate customer funds. So they talked to Carolyn Ellison, who's the CEO of Alameda Research, and she said, "Yeah, we took customer funds to fill a hole we had from illiquid venture investments that we had borrowed money to make the investments." But here's the crazy thing: in the top of the article, they called it a margin position. They called the $10 billion hole of customer funds a margin position, and it turns out that this writer, I'm not going to name his name. He's getting dragged enough, but he in May was at FTX's Bahamas compound, and like he had a tweet, like a breathless tweet. He's like, "Oh, I'm here with the genius SBF, and they got like FTX like branded condoms." And I'm like, Jesus Christmas, man! Did you do?
We now know what they were using those for, man. We've seen the pictures of the compound.
I don't want to speculate, man. But I'm seeing some of this.
Those stimulants.
Oh yeah, the stimmies, man. They're going hard on the stimmies. But dude, yeah, listen. It's getting a little bit dark on the. It's getting a little somber. Let's hit some of those other memes. Let's get back.
Yeah, what else have we got? I mean, we've got the Rick receipts, which aren't really memes, but they're the stuff that you were calling out SBF for.
Yeah, Rick had the exchange with him on. Oh, actually, Rick, you sent the. Rick sent a Slack message that the Autism Capital had posted of.
Yeah, I think that's much more interesting and relevant because SBF has been doing these kind of cryptic tweets where he just tweets out one character every so often. And then Autism Capital, who is like the #1 anonymous kind of supporter of SBF, has, right? In fairness, completely done a 180.
Oh, wait, so previously he was a supporter?
Big time, yeah, right?
Oh, he was huge. That was his whole shtick was SBF is a genius. He's going to soak up all the world's money and feels really stupid about it, and has done a 180 overnight and is now finding all the information he can and posting it.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So what you can see here, and I'll read this out for the people who are not watching the stream, is like someone internally at FTX who's still working there trying to resolve this situation says, "Why is Sam trolling on Twitter as though this isn't a serious situation? Question mark, exclamation mark. Did we not learn anything that Twitter got, did we not learn that trolling on Twitter got us here?" And then Sam responds, "I'm sorry, exclamation mark. Maybe it's wrong. I took that approach because something needed to break through the mob mentality, but I'll likely be more straightforward going forward." I mean, it's just such an unbelievable response to his team saying, "What the hell are you doing on Twitter? We're trying to clear up this gigantic mess that you created." And then there is a much longer response, which I think we'll link to the post, where someone just tells him, "Stop tweeting," basically, and we all trusted you. We all lost a lot of money. The whole community lost a lot of money, and you should absolutely not be just putting kind of unclear messages out there. And again, I just think this reveals the character of this guy time and time again. I mean, did anyone ever watch any of his interviews and think this is a person who really cares about crypto ideals and doing the right thing and all this stuff? Everyone I know would look at those videos where he kind of pushed his effective altruism and his noble goal to fund the world and just say he sounded like a dweeb who got sucked into the rationalist and effective altruism communities in the Bay Area and thinks that he's some kind of perfect automated donating machine. I mean, there was no soul to anything he ever did.
That's a tweet that I remember. I mentioned it last week. You wrote the same thing about Zuck. Obviously, not to call out Zuck. There's different animals, but it's like autonomous, like robotic, and like just very kind of. Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think that one thing I think people should think very carefully about is always the people behind the products and the protocols that they're using, right? And because those products and protocols really reveal who those people are. Like, it has been no surprise to me that, say, Stripe, for example, is this beautifully thought out, incredibly glossy, incredibly clearly written, and kind of marketed and kind of crafted piece of software that nearly all of us rely on day to day and use hundreds of times a year. Because the Collisons who built Stripe are just incredibly careful, meticulous, and caring people. Whereas someone like SBF, who's happy to just waddle around in shorts and an oversized t-shirt and just, claim that he's some kind of effective altruist and plaster his face on all these billboards with no understanding of any of the reason crypto existed in the first place, it's just no surprise to me that someone like that would try and keep the wheels going, even though his operation was losing money. So if there's anything I can take away, is like to really look into the people that make the products and who build the protocols that you rely on if you're in crypto. I think it's very important.
Waddle is such a great word, by the way. Waddle is a fantastic word.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Because I completely agree with what you just said there, Rick. And I would just say, like, stepping away from just SBF right now, in the last 6 to 12 months, we've had Luna, Do Kwon, Demise, Celsius. Forgot the dude's name, who was the main guy, Celsius.
Alex Mashinsky.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm probably forgetting a few others. 3AC, and there's a bunch, right, that have all kind of collapsed in this time. And this time last year, a lot of people were saying, I remember literally the week before the stuff happened with Luna, I was with a guy who I actually really respect, and I don't want to say his name because you might even know him, but basically we were talking about Luna, and he was just like, man, this guy, I think Do Kwon might be like the Elon Musk of crypto or something like that. And at the time, that was the sentiment, right? In a way, like, to a lot of people, maybe Elon Musk is a bit of a stretch. And I'm not saying he, had malicious intent himself. Obviously, it was just that was the veneer that everyone kind of had with putting these people on a pedestal.
Objectively, he said the words, "Die will die by my hand." Like, that's not a difficult leap to make. When somebody is shitting on the most important project in Ethereum that got launched in the biggest depths of the bear market by some of the most careful and meticulous engineers, this isn't something that you had to find in like a back room. Like, no one who is really proud of what they're building needs to shit on other teams that have done incredible work. Like, whatever Maker has done or succeeded or however it's changed, and of course it's evolved as a project, what they contributed in the depths of the bear market was the first critical DeFi application. And Rune has been a missionary there. When you read someone saying, I'm going to kill Maker instead of I'm going to build Luna, it's not hard for me to just say that guy is a complete scam artist and a complete fraud. And that's why I never touched Luna. And I remember replying to a bunch of his tweets just being like, good luck with that, man. Like, good luck with, when you dunk on DeFi, just like Alex Mashinsky did, he was always like, well, DeFi isn't really like true DeFi, whereas Celsius, we offer these amazing returns. Again, he was cooking the books. And with Do Kwon, he was juicing the leverage way too hard. Like, it's not difficult for me to see these things because I've noticed that just Vitalik generally talks constructively about what he's working on rather than negatively about what anyone else is working on.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I like, this is my filtration system for founders, like at the beginning as well. They're usually just very excited to talk about what they've built rather than shit on all of their competitors. Like, they're aware of the competition, the other products, but they're much more interested in like what they've made and they want to show you what they've created. So maybe these things are obvious to me, but maybe by sharing them, there's something that other people can start to look out for. Like, if the person who is holding your funds is dunking on other people instead of improving the product that you hold in your hands, think about where that person's energy is.
Yeah. And sorry, Trunk, can I just finish? I was just going to say the last thing, just to finish my thought on those people, and the reason I mentioned the Duquan thing was just that a lot of these people were built up, and I completely agree with you. Like, in hindsight, we can see a lot of the behavior, the way they were treating people online even. All of them there's a bunch of red flags there as well. At the same time, there's a bunch of people we all kind of, in air quotes, admire that are also shitting on people on the internet in some ways as well. So it's not like...
But they're not usually the highest quality founders. They're not. What I'm saying is,
that's
the
fair.
Founders where you trust your funds, the ones I admire the most, usually have built up their systems. Like Brian Armstrong does not spend time talking down about other exchanges. He's like, look at this new product we've launched. Look at this new system we've built. Look at this new integration we've had. And he doesn't spend his time knocking CZ or even knocking SBF or any of these other people. He's just like, look at the improvements we've made to the Coinbase wallet app, adding multi-party computation. Like generally, Brian just talks about what they've added to Coinbase, not what other teams have done and failed.
That's a good
example. He
example.
only has to comment on competitors when there's a disaster. And then if you talk the top tier DeFi founders, whether it's like Compound with Robert Leshner or Aave with Stani, they're just talking about the way that they have improved Compound, or Stani with the way he's built Aave and the team that built that. And then Lens Protocol, his latest move. Like, he's much more interested in talking about creation than he is dunking on other people. And so, these are the, and then even so, you don't have to kind of trust with those DeFi founders that they're being correct. They're audited 24/7 on chain by lots of very, very smart people. So
100%.
That's where I think, this is a huge win for top tier DeFi. And this has been a clearing of house of all of the charlatans who thought they could get away by piling on the leverage and tricking people into putting funds with their centralized custodial services that were all really just backroom slush funds for their leverage trading.
Yeah. Yeah, great point. Trung, you were going to say something, man.
Yeah, I just want to ask Rick about this. A lot of the names you mentioned, like Do Kwon, Magnitsky from Celsius, and SBF, so they came up around that 2017, 2018 vintage, right? That's kind of when they got their start versus, it kind of fits into your mercenary versus missionary thing. So I actually have two questions on that. The main one is, I know we had a lighthearted back and forth with Bobby Goodblatt, early investor in Coinbase. And angel investor in general. But what do you think about his thoughts of saying, like, it's sometimes good to have not just missionaries, or because, both sides, both extremes are bad, but his position was like, he argues a lot with Bitcoin maximalists, right? So what do you think about kind of his framing of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he created a false dichotomy where it's not just a single line through where it's missionary or mercenary. I think what he ends up fighting is people who are kind of totally allied with a single protocol and have kind of made it their entire identity. And so and generally Bitcoin maximalists are only interested in Bitcoin, and then there are Ethereum people who are only interested in Ethereum. I think he makes a very fair point, but like, if you're going to take a band of missionaries versus a band of mercenaries, I don't think anything exists without the missionaries. But the missionaries create the things that eventually get traded by the mercenaries. So I think it's much more important and interesting and kind of relevant to care about the creative missionaries versus the extractive mercenaries. And that's like another matrix or angle to it, is like, how much is someone giving to an ecosystem versus how much is someone taking? And I think you can say, for someone like Vitalik, he's just given literally every waking hour he can to the Ethereum community, despite having fewer and fewer ETH each year than just he has other investments and things like that. But generally, he's not an active angel investor and all that kind of stuff. He's just 100% focused on making Ethereum work. And of the people who got the protocol going back in 2014 to 2015, I think there's only fewer than a dozen who still actively contribute or put their energy into it. So there are lots of ways to analyze all these things, but my smell test for like people going forward is something I want to refine. I'm quite happy to say this openly. Like, one of the protocols I'm really concerned about is Curve. Now, why is that? I named Curve. I worked with Michael Egorov to launch it. I got it out the door, And then he went silent on me and all of his investors as soon as it started to work. And he's currently being pursued and sued in 3 countries. So let me just tell you one up front. I believe that Curve, despite being a kind of top tier DeFi protocol, is not fully decentralized and does have issues. And so I'll put that on your podcast and say that publicly. I think people should really watch out for that guy because of the way he treats people. And I can list a bunch more people who treat others incredibly poorly and have revealed themselves to me privately or even just publicly on Twitter. So I don't mean to be so downtrodden, but I'm trying to show people like how we filter for those people who are actually trying to be creative contributors to this ecosystem instead of just mercenary extractors.
That's my big takeaway from kind of listening to you is to have that red flag meter, right? And I'll be honest, like I wasn't necessarily credulous, but like I'm like, oh my God, look, this guy's FTX and SBF, they're killing it, man. Oh my God, they're crushing it, right? And never really looked closely, but at the same time, I'm never actually really tied up any of my personal assets into them. And we're being fully transparent. Like we had conversations for the podcast on potentially having them advertised because we know how much money these guys are throwing around. Dodge that bullet thing.
Yeah,
right?
Can you imagine, boys? Jesus Christ.
Oh my goodness, right?
So glad we didn't take any.
Yeah, this is why we have to stick to DTC, like beverage products. Like if you're listening Athletic Greens, like I drink that shit. I love it. Wait, Jack, did you
I really admire Ledger's status on Up Only, just saying I got duped and I'm sorry and I apologize. Like, way to go for just owning it.
I think that's a great thing to bring up actually, because I think there's been a lot of people who have kind of been calling out, like in air quotes, influencers or people who have an audience, like whether it's a podcast, even people. And I saw Pomp write a big thread about BlockFi specifically because he was literally on the board of directors. He was, was sponsoring his podcast for a long time, and FTX as well. And they're 2 very different cases here, Up Only and Pomp, but just using those 2 as examples, personally, my opinion is, like, when you're in that position, like, I've had, like, 20 plus advertisers on Creator Lab, right? I know a lot of those brands, and most of the time I try to use a product or whatever, but sometimes you don't know the ins and outs of a company, obviously, right? You're basically reading them out. You basically say, this is a paid for sponsorship. You're not, like, trying to pretend to shield something. And there's a line. Some people might say, actually, you should only promote stuff you really know in and out. And other people are like, well, it's an ad. It's like if we put this on YouTube and an ad runs on our thing, we don't control what is being shown on that. But yeah, I'm curious to get your guys' take on that because I think like Pomp's one specifically, because I've spoken to him about this in the past. Like BlockFi is another one that's kind of fallen now, right? Because of FTX, and BlockFi was
just
basically
filed for bankruptcy.
Just filed for bankruptcy. Today. When Celsius, had the same problem. All of the people I had spoken to in the past about, basically there was like Celsius, Nexo, and BlockFi were the 3 that I knew lots of people using. And I was like, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but like, not advice, but this is what I would be doing if I have any money in these. I just wouldn't worry about 5-6%. I would just make sure I've got my stuff custodied myself. But I'm curious what you guys think about like that issue with people promoting stuff, especially in the case of like FTX where, it wasn't just like random people. It's Tom Brady and Larry David or whatever, and it's
Well, dude, let me give my thoughts, like because I don't want to lose a thread on this. Like, exactly. Listen, we dodged the bullet because they just never came through. Like, let me be fully honest here. If this was a year ago, FTX like here, we'll do a quarter with you for call it 10, 20 grand. We would have taken that. Let's be fully honest. We would have taken that amount. Most likely, not 100%. I don't speak for all 3 of us.
10, 20 grand, but okay, all right. Yeah.
No, that.
Whatever the number, I'm joking,
Athletic Greens, those are hypothetical numbers.
Yeah, that was just.
But I mean, like, you guys know what I'm saying, right? A year ago, in the kind of raw days, and Bilal, just to answer your question, I was like, you've had advertisers in Creator Lab, I've had advertisers in my newsletter, and I haven't done full due diligence on every single advertiser in my newsletter. Like,
here's a mental model for you: if the CEO of the company is not domiciled in the same jurisdiction as you, maybe don't take the advertising. That guy was bouncing Hong Kong, Bahamas, in and out, everywhere, paying off everyone. Whereas Brian and Jesse and like the CEO of Anchorage, they're all in California and they're paying insane California taxes to be here because they get insane amounts of value from it. And I just think, you know, when you got a guy who's just shifting around the world, that means they're trying to dodge something from the get-go. So if you ever are working with, you know, someone, just think about, like, are they actually in the same risk framework as me? Like, if they go under, will all of my customers that I push to them, you know, experience the same thing that I'm going to experience?
Yeah, good. That's a great point.
We're getting a lot of good heuristics here from Rick, man. Is like
framework
Rick,
episode.
Yeah, this is the framework episode, man. Yo, did we just lose Jack?
Yeah, I think Jack dropped off, but when he comes back,
all good. All right, all good. Okay, so I got a follow-up question for Rick. So Rick, to summarize your kind of thoughts on the quote unquote setting back the industry, in a way hurts retail. Those people may never come back, understandably. And we hope they get some resolution that's better than 5% on the dollar. Unlikely, it looks like. The other part is like, for you though, is like the builders, the real builders get the chance to build with the ethos of crypto. But I think an interesting thing that I've seen come up quite a bit and something that's really stuck with me is the institutional money side, right? Because a big argument for a big bullish argument for crypto is like, what happens if the entire endowment, pension, insurance world puts 1% of their assets into crypto? A week ago, that's not a big deal. Like 1% allocation, uncorrelated, it's not that risky, to be fully honest.
You talking about the Ontario teachers
not
fund?
Not just Ontario. I'm talking about the entire asset class.
I'm joking.
So what that I think a very astute observation from Ben Hunt from Epsilon Theory is the Epsilon Theory Twitter account is if you're a CIO for an endowment now, there's no chance you're going to convince.
No,
so what is that? So Rick, my question then is like, is this over forever though? This is what I mean. Is like that institutional wave of money. We're talking potentially hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars was supposed to be allocated towards crypto, real project. If that's gone, one of the biggest catalysts for crypto is off the table.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to separate there between institutions allocating some portion to like an existing crypto asset and like seed funds willing to back new founders creating new crypto assets. So I think the institutions, it cools off for a little while, but like usually they're buying the tail end fumes of a whole bunch of innovation that occurred 5 to 10 years ago. Like institutions are still getting comfortable buying ETH. On the institutional level, I think you are going to see the big banks who have been exploring crypto, like for example, Goldman Sachs has been exploring crypto really actively. You know, institutions are just going to look like for a brand like that for custody from now on. If they decide they want to hold ETH on their balance sheet for some reason in the future. From a kind of large corporation level, you look at the unbelievable business development from that guy, Ryan Wiz, down in LA with Polygon. I mean, he's just integrated it into Starbucks, Nike, just so many different large brands. And it's crazy Instagram, the way in which Reddit, Instagram, like
Elon asked him on Twitter to join Twitter, by the way. I don't know if you guys saw that.
He's, like,
he's the one who did gaming at YouTube, right?
Yeah, he's head of gaming at
YouTube. Yeah, he's a savage. So I think that like big companies are phrasing it the right way and like exploring it in the right way, not by kind of shipping out culture for free or for low cost and like letting people enjoy the value of that afterwards. That's where I think, you know, crypto still has a really good story in America. But some of the seed funds get hosed, but like most of them were using Gnosis Safe or like actually using the technology that they are supposedly interested in funding. So a lot of the best seed funds I know have not been touched at all because they didn't trust that guy as far as they could throw him. So yes, it's a cooling off. Yes, some companies died, but those founders, and early teams, if they really care, like carry on working in the industry. But the most important point for me is that memes of decentralization are pretty hollow and don't connect with people. Memes around control, empowerment, storing your assets, having access to your funds, not getting FTX'd. Is now a much stronger meme, and I think that means that people can actually start moving some funds into a wallet, and then when they actually get a wallet, they start connecting to dApps and doing things with it and buying interesting NFTs or music or connecting with people on social networks and chat systems built on Ethereum, and actually move from traders to users. And like that funnel, I think is still 100 to 1, but I think it's going to grow, and even if it grows to say 20 to 1, that's a massive improvement. It's a 5x increase in the number of like monthly active users of dApps.
Let me just
and that brings me back.
Sorry, I just want to add one thing because listening to you speak, I just want to say that I think I agree with you. Before I asked you that question, I'm like, man, it's done. Like, I don't think institutions ever come back. But then you kind of look at the junk bond situation in the late 80s with Mike Milken. That obviously was hugely controversial. Then you look at mortgage-backed securities. Obviously, these asset classes are already so big and they're so intertwined with the real economy that they might feel a little bit. But having said that, they went through convulsions, and now people don't bat an eyelash to invest in those asset classes, right? So I just wanted to add that. It's like, listening to you talk, I think I've walked myself off the ledge of like institutions are done with crypto forever, because the reality is that if those things make money and the number goes up, they'll be back.
Yeah, exactly. And if it provides actual real yield not from just the next yield farm, but from people buying products and services on Ethereum, paying gas fees, and that flowing back to ETH holders, that's not a yield that's based on a kind of single activity or a random token with a food like name slapped on it. That's Ethereum as an ecosystem generating a fee that someone could participate in forever. And like that's a very different proposition.
Did I cut you off? I cut you off before you were about to finish the thought. I don't
know. No, not at all.
Okay.
No, just I guess the an area I'd like to talk about and something that I care deeply about is people actually using dApps and getting value from them.
Let's talk about the app you're working and the Chrome, the Safari extension.
Yeah, so like last time I came on the podcast, we were exploring extensions, and I've stepped into a role where I'm trying to help founders who are making the experience of using dApps on your phone a lot better. So right now, if anyone has ever tried to use a dApp on Ethereum on their phone, they tap like a button, it pops them over to the wallet, then the wallet pops them back to the app, then they've got to confirm a transaction, it pops them back to the wallet, then they've got to pop back to the app, then they've got to sign a transaction, pops them back. It's just a crazy user experience. We are bouncing between your browser and a wallet. And what's cool is that now we can put wallets inside Safari, and I've been helping out a founder, Shun, who's been doing this light wallet prototype that I pinned on my Twitter. And what's so cool is you can like use dApps natively like inside Safari and like approve transactions, sign transactions, connect instantly, and things like that. And I think this is really important because my biggest fear is the level of laptop blindness we have in the Ethereum community. Like everyone here can afford a laptop, a desktop computer, all these things. That's not available to most people, and most people do the majority of their financial transactions and things on their phone. And if you actually try and use dApps on your phone, and very few people do, to be quite frank, but when you do, it is excruciating. And so we're trying to like improve that. And again, this all speaks to products that are only enabled by self-custodial wallets, products that allow you to interact with protocols and dApps directly. And those are kind of occurring in the browser and need to be enabled by a wallet. And so now you can click those things together. But this is moving away from like trading. I just get nervous and I think price go up, price go down. When I buy a music NFT on sound.xyz, for example, I love it. Like I'm getting a relationship with an artist. They give me free tickets to their future shows. Like I feel like I own a piece of digital culture. Mint.fun is an amazing website. There are like free mints every day and all you pay are the gas fees. And I just like go on there and I find cool art and I mint them. And you know, some of those do go up, but my kind of entry cost is almost zero. And then there are products like Showtime.io where you can like link your Spotify and like mint stuff from artists, and you develop a relationship through the NFT and they message you through it. And those kinds of things are coming. So I guess I want to like articulate that there's this world of really impressive dApps out there. They do work on mobile, but the mobile wallet experience is like excruciating. And so try and improve that, push that forward, I hope will lead to more people just using self-custody, not because they're scared of FTX and SBF, but because they're excited to use some of these products. And it's very, very early, but we're starting to see mobile dApps being really fluid. And I care about that a lot. And that's what I keep pushing on and working on.
Just to confirm, so you are advising with Light,
helping out Shun, the founder, and like a bunch of other teams doing self-custodial software. And
I did install it yesterday. It was
wallets.
Very slick. I've only actually done 2 or 3 Safari extensions, and I know that. So you've written about online, and we talked about last time you were here. Is like you mentioned just now is like Apple actually is the big unlock potentially, right? We don't know how deep they'll go into crypto, but
yeah, I think Apple don't care about crypto anymore. It's been a disaster this year internally, I think, from my understanding. So Celsius, I think, was the #1 app store like support request for Apple at one point, because everyone's like, hey, I downloaded this app and I just lost my savings. Like, I blame you, Apple. I can't get anything back from Celsius.
Damn.
So it's really, really bad. And then, you know, they literally removed the FTX app without even talking to them. Like, that's how bad they could see what was going on. I mean, they just removed it from the store.
And they're obviously allowed to do that, right? Like, their terms of service is.
I mean, it's their fiefdom. They can do what they want. But that's how. And just like internally, the message, everyone's like, when's Apple going to do a crypto wallet? The answer to that, in my opinion, is never, because it opens you up to tons of liability, and there's actually not that much upside for regular humans. I think they may improve the APIs and the crypto APIs, and like potentially do an API for the secure enclave. But I think that as a priority for Apple is never going to occur, because quite frankly, the user experience for most people has been going on an app, doing some trading and losing some money. And they did that on their iPhone. That's not good for Apple.
No, Rick, this is when we spoke to you 6 months ago, obviously before all this fuckery happened, you were much more optimistic, but to your
much
point,
more optimistic. All the times I've been trying to reach out to Apple employees and get conversations going, talk about that, all of that's been shut down.
There's just no point. I mean, to your point, like these guys,
there's no one who's willing.
$200 billion a year,
why would anyone
right?
hitch?
Yeah. What's the point?
Exactly. It's a rounding error for them in terms of app usage and like products that people love. Whereas, you know, you take a product like 1Password, people love that product. They're like, saves me so much time and energy and helps me log into things. You know, Apple love products like that. So the Safari Extensions API is great because it allows us to do things that don't touch Apple's ecosystem inside Safari. And they like that they're okay with that. What they're cracking down on is like NFTs enabling new features inside wallets, and NFTs acting as kind of in-app payments, and they always want to take their toll. But I think that wallets that kind of enable the Safari extension will allow dApp developers to do the magic in the web, and the wallet just to sit there in the background and process transactions.
I've always appreciated your perspective on Apple. For the listeners that didn't see the last time Rick was here, he's got this giant like Apple designer like book. You still got that thing? Thing's amazing, right?
Oh, and, I've got another one as well. This is.
I love your description of how Apple thinks about though, right? It's like if Apple's allowing crypto apps on their phone and the experience is just number go up and number go down. I mean, fair enough. They have Robinhood on there too, and all the trading apps. But I don't know.
This one's pretty cool. It's got one of the first explanations of a user interface on it. It's the Inside Macintosh volumes 1, 2, and 3, and it's this
incredible.
Giant
could you show the cover again?
The cover is real OG.
Sure. Yeah, this is old school. Like when they were trying to explain how to use your Mac.
Oh my goodness!
And like they have this explanation of like what a window manager is. So like here is a window, and here is a scroll bar, and like these are going to overlap, and then like the rest of the book is just this giant, like look at how an application talks to your printer and stuff like this.
That's awesome.
I just find this as like a cool.
Do you know what year that's
Apple
from?
Began.
Is that from
I believe
80s?
It's from the 80s, like early 80s.
It's just crazy, like seeing that as a diagram, like what we all now use as a window, because they basically invented the GUI, right?
Well, they popularized it, and then I think what Microsoft really shipped it out. But it was there's always
to be clear, both of them stole it.
They stole. What was the story there? Who
they both saw it at Xerox PARC, and the joke.
Exactly,
and Bill Gates, Rick will know. Bill Gates said in the early '90s is like when Steve Jobs was accusing him of stealing it from Apple. Bill Gates goes, well, actually, the way I see it is that we both went to the neighbor's house to rob them. You robbed it first, and then I came in after you.
That's hilarious. So I didn't know that.
This was copyright 1985, and the latest edition was 88. So pretty amazing how far we've come, right? Like with user interface design. And
let me throw something to JB, Jack Butcher here. Jack, we haven't really spoke. Well, we've been exchanging mostly memes over the past week, so I'd like to get a bit of your temperature now that we know the severity of this FTX situation, because you obviously are still involved, more involved than either myself or Bilal, and kind of like these. I'm gonna call them Web3, but like you're still messing around in crypto a bit. Like, what has your thoughts been over the past week? Has it changed what you believe the future is? And just what's your temperature?
Well, I agree with everything that everybody said today, but also this like blow up of this magnitude being a reset on the barometer for the things people trust is obviously painful in the short term, but it feels to me like even down to the nuances of like sponsors for a podcast, right? Like the due diligence that you have the responsibility to conduct now.
Yes.
And like you look back and it's like the stuff is so obvious in hindsight, right? Like this is always the way where it's like, you call the top of any market by the absolute egregious actions, right? The Tom Brady Super Bowl ad. Someone had an amazing tweet that said, if you shorted every company that had a Super Bowl ad this year, you'd be a billionaire.
Oh my God, the
level. Yeah, crazy.
So I think like that idea of getting sucked into it's like this reputational, like anybody working that hard to build a reputation or to buy a reputation, beware, right? And all of this, to Rick's point, is kind of the complete opposite of how this culture began and what made it great in the first place, which is like people working on projects together because they believe in the thing. And I think, this is like the clearing of the forest floor in a lot of ways. And I was like tangentially exposed to crypto through 2017. I'd never like exited a position because of any of that stuff, but I didn't have the connections or the experience to know that there was opportunities to build directly in the space. Like I was probably had a similar experience to what people are having now, obviously not with the severity of losing all your funds, but 90% drawdown, and then thinking like, oh, well, I guess this is never coming back, versus having the exposure to, oh, you can actually build stuff with this. And to Rick's point, like until you've like put a transaction through on Ethereum that isn't like buy or a sell order, I don't think you really can appreciate like the magic of it. It feels like, when you were like, I'm sure everybody has a different memory here, but like the first computer you ever got, you fire it up. I was playing like Worms on my computer in the 90s or something, right? It's like, there is something unbelievable about this, like the experience you have. And I think restarting from that perspective, and there's going to be speculators, there's going to be idiots, there's going to be like caution thrown to the wind as a function of like number go up, and everybody gets caught up in that to some extent. But I don't know, short-term painful, long-term incredibly promising. And to be honest, the market reaction is actually not as crazy as like if you look like at the actual like the underlying assets, the reaction has not been that aggressive.
The Solana community got their just desserts. I mean, partnering with people like Kyle Samani and SBF has cost them dearly. And I'm certain that the founders of Solana wish that they had not hitched their wagon to them so tightly.
Yeah. Crypto again, Mamba. We got to bring that tweet up, right? One of the greatest clapbacks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Wait, have you got that? That's good.
I don't know this one. Oh,
yeah.
Bring it up.
SBF.
Actually, Rick, could you tee this up? I'm going to bring up the tweet. Let's give people.
Good.
So this is like early, like when SBF was building his ledger. So this is January 2021.
Yeah.
FBF is like,
this is when.
This Twitter stuff's interesting. Like you can build a pretty big personality on Twitter. Let me start clapping back at people. So, Rick, can you tell us what you remember of it? And then I'll pull up the tweet.
Yeah, so my understanding is CoinMamba was kind of questioning the value of the Solana ecosystem and just, putting his thesis for why he was not impressed. And then SBF comes out with this kind of legendary clapback of like, I think it was roughly speaking, I'll buy all the Sol you want for $3, then go fuck off.
Yeah.
And then obviously after that, Solana, I think, touched $250. So it made SBF look like a genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it made SBF look like a genius. And, and this CoinMamba guy was just feeling a little bit silly, but is a legendary trader and does.
So CoinMamba he is a legend. Okay.
Yeah. I think he's done like extremely well for himself. He doesn't really care. But on the news that the entire value of the FTX holding companies and everything is $1, he was just like, I'll buy literally everything you have for
this is the great people.
Here we go.
Trung Phan.
Oh my God.
Hollywood Trung Phan for the listeners here. Everything Rick just said. On January 9, 2021, after a long and laborious debate, SBF writes to Coin Mamba, who is a legendary crypto trader, I'll buy as much SOL as you have right now at $3. Sell me all you want, then go fuck off. On November 11, 2022, so this is 18 months later, Coin Mamba rolls back up into the thread. You know he had this thing bookmarked.
Oh my God, can you imagine the feeling?
You know
Jesus
Coin
Christ.
Mamba had one tab on his internet, Chrome browser open.
Always open.
18 months. He was waiting for the moment. So Coin Mamba replies to his thread after 18 months. It's been dead. And he just writes, I'll buy everything you have right now at $3. Sell me all you want, then go fuck off. But here's the kicker, exactly what Rick said. He took the Bloomberg terminal photo of Sam Bankman that showed that he was worth $0. No, minus. Wait, is this the one that shows him worth? There's one Bloomberg.
I think it's the one day.
Yeah.
Well, no, his net worth says $3 there. Maybe it was doctored, but it's the perfect meme.
It was a great
good.
meme.
That's the
Oh
best.
my.
Yeah.
So that was the greatest clap back of everything. And yeah, listen, just dessert. We're talking about just desserts here. Well, actually, so Rick, let me ask you, jumping on Jack's point there. So Bitcoin and Ethereum have seemed to weathered. I mean, I thought this shit was going to zero, man. But like, can you talk about no investment advice, none of that? It's just like, do you think where they're sitting versus how awful the situation was? It's just like, people are able to separate these things. How's your kind of view on that?
I mean, I don't have like good insights into like why prices go up or down at all.
Right.
But what I will say is, I think among every sophisticated investor, Ethereum pulling off proof of stake successfully and becoming deflationary in terms of like the number of ETH circulating, that's quite an important meme. Like there's this kind of ultrasound money term out there. But the idea that Bitcoin is going to inflate for the rest of our natural lives and actually the number of ETH may deflate over time, that actually makes Bitcoin what's called disinflationary, which means it is increasing but will stop. And now ETH is deflationary. And so I think that for true believers and people that have like the dry powder and have been paying attention to the ecosystem at a higher level than just like charts, they still feel conviction and see it as a good time to like stock up.
Mother of all buying opportunities. That's how I kept seeing that.
maybe not, but like they just view it as like short-term weakness.
Yeah.
But I don't really participate in any of that kind of stuff. I'm much more interested in like ideally transactions that give me like a superpower or access to culture. Like those are the kinds of transactions that I spend a lot of time thinking about and doing and like playing with on my phone and trying to make easier to use.
Well,
that's another heuristic, by the way.
The other thing I would like to like draw attention to and just speak more broadly is I really want to delineate between like people having a good honest try and it not working. And I've definitely been an advisor to, supporter of, and proponent of projects that have like tried something, it has absolutely not worked out the way we all hoped, and they've had to like wind it down. I've definitely been involved in stuff like that. And like that, we should have infinite support for as a community, and there should not be like this like mob mentality and clap back. There should be like, are they honest about how they went into it and honest how they went out of it? And I think those instances, that's fine. Versus just either gross incompetence or malevolence, or and at the worst level is just outright fraud and theft. So I do think we need to like be gentle with founders who gave it a good honest try and supportive of their next explorations and attempts, and incredibly harsh and kind of tough on these people who are just outright frauds or liars.
Yeah, fair. Well, I think the one thing I want to bring up, Rick, you mentioned like real use cases earlier. You were talking about playing with music NFTs and other NFTs and wallets and stuff like that. I'd be curious to hear, like, are there any other cool things happening that we'd want to, shed a light on, essentially? And while you're thinking about that, if anything comes to mind, I'd also saved a thing that Jack had shared recently about the Instagram digital collectibles, which we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, which actually seems like perfect for visualized value, given you've got like, I think 500,000 people following you on Instagram looking at your visuals. So I'd love to get Jack's take on some of the stuff that's been happening with that. And even Nike just announced the dot swoosh stuff. So just to turn it into a bit more of a productive conversation after all the crazy FTX stuff, like let's talk about some good stuff being built. Well, one of you could go first. I think Jack, you might be muted. So go on.
Yeah,
go on.
I could do a little. The Instagram stuff is this is like that magic feeling that I was explaining before, where you realize that you've built this relationship at scale with a lot of people through work that you've published, but all of it exists on these servers of social networks that you don't own in any fashion whatsoever, right? And the paradox of that is you can go and start your own platform and start to share your work there, and have work that you have digital provenance over on Ethereum, for example, but you don't get to leverage the network effects of Facebook, Twitter, all these massive businesses. So one thing I was skeptical that they were going to do is to actually integrate with those protocols where the assets are hosted that are not their infrastructure. And that's one of those special feelings where it's like, wow, when you mint your first piece of work, you're like, why haven't I been doing this all along? And why am I not assigning provenance to all the art I'm creating from this point forward? And it still has that weird, the relationship between it is so strange, because you think about like scarcity in terms of publishing your work and making your work accessible to a market, but provenance over the longer term, I think, is the more important thing. And if you think about creating this network of assets that live on Ethereum, those can be like ported across into all these other networks that can help you reach the people you want to reach. Yeah. So I think they did an amazing job on the integration of it, the first round of it anyway. I don't have access to the sales side of it, but you connect a wallet through Instagram and you can go and access all of the NFTs you either own or minted or created and share them directly to the feed. And through those posts, people can discover where they live on Ethereum.
And so you were pleasantly surprised, it sounds like, right?
Very much so, yeah.
And so I'm just pulling up the visual for people watching as well, because you wrote here, mint on Ethereum, exhibit on Instagram, and this is the UI you had shared on Instagram.
Yeah, if you go to one of the next ones, so they have that little signifier in the bottom left, digital collectible, and then when you click on that, it tells you token ID and Ethereum, and I think you can click out. And then in the back end, that one that you were just on, go back. Yeah. This is just your ability to access all of the images that or all of the NFTs, I should say, that you've minted. Yeah. So the idea that all of that stuff lives with like immutable provenance somewhere, and you can just use the rails of Instagram or Twitter to broadcast that, I think should start to get people thinking about where their work lives. Do they own it? And uploading it to Instagram is not has nowhere near the same feedback loop of provenance as minting it on Ethereum. And that's just a hard thing to know until you experience it. And obviously there's been so much skepticism surrounding it, around even selling work, right? Like the idea that this has to be sold is, even in my mind, that's kind of overtaken the narrative in a strange way, where it's like, if you are a digital artist, or even if you're a blogger, right? If you want to put work on the internet, like where should that live? Where should the original of that live? And because we conduct our lives digitally, having the ability to store that somewhere that is immutable and no one can take it away from you is, I think, a really powerful meme, but it's going to take a long time to take hold in people's minds, I feel like.
Well, Jack,
I think it's going to take less time than you think. Sorry, just because like the number of people that got cancelled for saying relatively inane things in the 6 months since we last spoke is insane. I mean, Steve will do it, relatively inane stuff, and like got removed from YouTube and all his income taken out. And I think the other great thing that's happened in the last 6 months since we spoke is just Farcaster and Lens Protocol have just taken off. They got really dedicated, small but growing communities. And they have created this kind of new space of social protocols. So protocols where your posts are living anywhere, but there are going to be different kinds of filters, different kinds of algorithms, different kinds of systems on them. Like if people want to live in their democratic bubble, they can live in their own bubble. If they want to live in a crypto bubble, they can. They're going to be able to tweak their algorithms. And so I think that it's great to see huge social networks starting to add protocols, and then new social networks starting to turn the corner on growth. Some of these things, if they keep compounding that growth rate month to month, they'll be massive in 5 years.
Yeah, shout out to Farcast. I love that.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Well, Jack, I was just going to bring up, where you just showed that we just showed the interface of Instagram, the collectibles there. I haven't tried this out myself, but when I logged in, it said you can connect your wallet and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. But it made me think of Looks Rare, like when we were all playing around on OpenSea with NFTs last year, and Looks Rare opened up, and you could click a button and connect your wallet, and it just ported all of your existing NFTs over with a click. And that was like, imagine doing that with Instagram to Twitter, all your videos on TikTok, press this button, they're going to be imported into Instagram, but not like being duplicated. They're actually being hosted essentially in the same place. And that is something, I don't know if you can do that with Instagram, the way that they're setting this up. But
in theory, you can.
If it's being set up on Ethereum, then it should be, right?
And then I think it changes the incentives at the platform layer, where it's like we have to innovate to make our platform the most pleasant place to spend time and build features that are interesting, versus we need to incentivize people to host their content on our platform, which is what they're like. That's the arbitrage now, right? It's like we will be the place where you host content, and in return we give you attention. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with that relationship, but if the underlying value that you're creating doesn't have this like immutable relationship to you, then there's a lot of risk involved in that for you as a creator of those things. And I think people maybe underestimate, like, it's not even necessarily about saying something controversial. It's about like the fact that culture is digital maybe COVID was the turning point there, where like it feels like point of no return in terms of like news breaks on the internet, art is made on the internet, like these moments in culture happen on the internet, and feels like we need infrastructure to keep doing what we do as people in preserving those things as they happen. And that's what I think Ethereum enables.
All right, thanks again, Rick, for being on the show. Really appreciate you being there. You're at Rick Burton on Twitter, right?
Yeah, RICBURTON. And if anyone wants to talk about wallets or dApps or anything being built on Ethereum, happy to chat.
Perfect, man. All right, we'll share that in the show notes as well. Thanks again for being there. Thanks for everyone for your support, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, guys. Thank you.
Rick.